So I'm kind of excited about that. But I just wanted to let you know, if you can also just sit back and you don't have to take notes and just really try to soak this in, if that's your preferred learning style. So just feel free to do that. Maybe feel free to use those post-it notes right now or save them for another day. But get comfortable with kind of what feels good for you. And also, if you think you're on mute or if you don't think you're on mute, it's always good to check. I always make the mistake of accidentally talking when I'm not muted when I think I am. So um, go ahead and feel free to do that unless you want to entertain us a little bit later on. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And if you could give me the thumbs up that that I'm sharing, does that look good? Okay, great. So, so vital conversations, and that's our topic for today. And we're going to talk about really how you can use them to grow and to sustain and nurture the influence that you have on the well-being of your population. So a little bit about me. So thank you, Katie, for that intro. I appreciate it. I'm the well-being lead at Gallup, so I get to integrate all of our research that Gallup does, all the science and research on well-being and engagement and on all those good things into our internal program, and I help our clients and the public understand how they can integrate it into what they're doing, into their key initiatives as well. And this is my family here. We're fresh off of a summer vacation, and our boys they've been back to school for a couple weeks now. We kind of start early. I live in Omaha, Nebraska, so just a couple of states down the road from you. And so anyway, we're kind of back into a routine, and things are feeling at least a little bit normalish for the time being. So that's where we're at. And here's how we're going to be spending our time together today. We're first going to kind of ground ourselves in the definitions and the explanations of vital conversations. So I'll kind of give you some context and background on that. And then we'll do some practicing in application. So we'll apply the concepts in to the situations that you kind of find yourself in at work as a leader of people and a leader of well-being. And then we'll also explore and learn to apply some concepts that are really personal to you as a human being, that revolve around your personal strengths and your values. So with that, I want to start our time together here today with a quick story about my friend Todd. He's a coworker of mine. And Todd is a big runner. He is an avid runner, and he's completed several marathons in the past. And this story is from a while ago. It's from when I was working in our fitness center as the fitness center manager in 2008. Todd was getting ready for a race that would take place in Argentina, a full marathon. So he was building up his mileage and running 4 or 5 miles every afternoon in the gym and getting really psyched and excited about this race that was coming up. But Todd also started to wear the same shirt or the same set of shirts towards kind of the and towards the end of the runs, I started to notice that his shirt or something like that smelled a little bit. So it's kind of awkward. But I didn't really want to say anything about it because I didn't think it was a big issue. It really only smelled for maybe a couple minutes. Maybe I just have hyper smell abilities, and it wasn't that big of an issue, so I just put it aside. But then with a couple months of training left before his marathon, Todd started to bump up his mileage, and he would start doing 2-a-days. And he would come in early in the morning before I arrived to work, and he would run his 4 or 5 miles in the morning, and he'd also come again in the afternoon and do his afternoon 4 or 5 miles as well. So pretty big time. He was very committed, loved his energy, very inspiring. He was also very kind to others and really helped just lift the spirits of the whole room when he was there. But I started to notice that the smells started to get a little worse. And it got worse at a slow rate. So I didn't say anything to him because, again, I didn't bring it up earlier. I don't think I'll bring it up again. It might be embarrassing, it might be uncomfortable, and I just didn't really know how he would handle it. And honestly, didn't know how I would handle it either. I was kind of worried about what I might say. So I just let it go. And until I got a request from two women who also worked out in the morning. They said, Ryan, Todd is starting to smell bad, and we're wondering if maybe you could address it with him. And I was like, well, are you sure? I don't know exactly if that's my role. And I kind of left it at that. And again, I didn't address it. It was too uncomfortable still. So they took matters into their own hands and they started arriving for their morning sessions earlier so they could avoid Todd altogether. They got done with their workouts early. Todd came in after that, and then they could avoid the conflict. So problem solved, right? Problem solved for about a week, because then Todd started to come into the gym even earlier yet, because he was also in need of increasing his miles. So I really had a big problem on my hands. The two women were again upset, and they asked me again if I could address the situation. And they actually didn't really ask me directly, but in a really roundabout way, they were kind of pleading and just joking about it a little bit. And I could sense, okay, I need to do something about this. So I mustered up as much confidence and kindness and courage as I could. And I talked with Todd, and I simply told him, hey, I think I'm not sure if this is you, could be your clothes, might be hanging on to some smell. And here's a couple things you might try to cure it. And it was, my heart was pumping. I think I was sweating. I was stuttering. It was hard to get the words to come out of my mouth. He was embarrassed. And he said he didn't really realize that it had gotten out of hand. And I said, don't worry about it. It's all good. Not your fault. Not a big deal. Um, but I did feel bad. I felt like it was a big deal, and that I could have stopped it from becoming that big of a deal if I would have just had a conversation, a short conversation with him a lot earlier. So that is my first memory of my first vital conversation. And you see, vital conversations consist of identifying issues and then discussing issues. And the result of this equation is healthy teams and healthy relationships and healthy organizations. So in my example, I had identified the issue with Todd, and then ultimately and eventually, it took me a while, I addressed it and I discussed the issue, the problem with Todd. But here's the thing: we can measure the health and the productivity of teams and relationships and organizations by measuring the amount of time it takes between identifying and discussing problems. So it's that plus sign in the equation that is the part that we can expedite to help us really achieve those healthy outcomes that we need and that we really strive for in our career. So throughout the US, and the great state of Wisconsin, and really everywhere, there's a big problem. It's called organizational silence. And this is where major issues and personality clashes and poor decisions, they go unchallenged and unspoken of. And it leads to a lot of poor outcomes, a lot worse outcomes than what I had to endure in my first vital conversation. So you might recognize organizational silence in meetings where people give updates and it just kind of goes around the horn. People are just giving updates, but there's no one who ever really steps in and questions things like processes, or asks for clarification, or even conducts healthy debates. So the hope here today is to give you some knowledge and some how-to and some inspiration to kind of address these issues and break organizational silence that you have, that maybe is stored inside you and also your employees within your organization. So according to Crucial Conversations, it's a book by Patterson and Grenny, Switzler, and McMillan. All vital conversations with two or more people include these three components that you see here. So opposing opinions, strong emotions and high stakes. So in my case with Todd, I kind of disagreed with the women. I didn't really think that I needed to talk with Todd. I didn't know exactly that it was going to be, it was my issue to resolve. So we kind of disagreed there. There were also emotions involved. They were upset. So there were emotions on their side. There was also emotions on my side. I was scared to bring it up. I had plenty of fear. So obviously my fear resulted in not talking about it. There were high stakes. So my personal brand was on the line. I might start setting up, I might start like finding that other people, other associates who are using the gym are upset, bothered by this issue. And I knew that if I didn't do anything about this, it might hurt my manager's confidence in me. If she had heard about it, might hurt her confidence in me to tackle and to take on bigger issues and initiatives in something silly and fundamental as this one here. So you might notice that a vital conversation is necessary if you're feeling some of those fight or flight symptoms. So when we feel like we're going to fight, so fight is really to take the issue head on and to address it, to talk about it, not physically fight, but to bring it up. Sometimes our emotions kind of overtake our ability to speak with clarity and with calmness and with kindness. But if we go into flight mode, which is kind of to ignore the problem or to hope that it might just fix itself, which we often do, it can cause just as much disruption as if we fought a bad fight. So learning to have positive, vital conversations and learning who to have them with and learning where to have them is a really important part in your personal growth in your career. So move on here. So, and really the key with anything that we want in our life is preparation. So when the time comes when we need to have a vital conversation, we need to start with ourselves and decide exactly what we're dealing with. So list out some questions. So talk with yourself about what are the facts in this situation? What do I know? What do I not know? And why is this situation bothering me? Or why is this situation bothering someone else? And also, what do I hope to get out of the conversation? So when you start to answer some of these questions with yourself, you start to get you get an idea of what needs to be done and how it can be done, and you start learning about the facts that you can present once you're in the conversation. Still, when you're with yourself, when you're preparing, we need to kind of enter and understand that we need to enter the conversation and the discussion knowing why we're having it and what the preferred outcome is. So do we need more information from this individual or a team, or does someone need to apologize or just own up to the issue at hand? Does a new plan need to be created? Is this event an isolated event, or is it reoccurring? Is this an interpersonal issue? So when we understand kind of the seriousness of the issue beforehand, then we can kind of establish how the conversation will be handled. So for example, let's say a manager feels like they need to speak to an employee because they were offline and mostly unavailable during the workday, during the afternoon yesterday for several hours, and there was really no notice about their absence. So this conversation that a manager is going to have with that employee is going to be handled differently based upon previous behavior. So if this is the first time this has happened, an isolated event, then that conversation might just start and end with a quick question like, hey, I noticed you weren't available yesterday in our chat, in our conversation, just wanted to check in and make sure everything is all right. And that's how you can start a conversation, just with that curiosity or with that question. However, if a manager had maybe noticed that that in the past this same employee has been kind of habitually kind of showing that similar types of behaviors or habits, then the conversation might need to progress into kind of another level of how to rectify the reoccurring problem. So selecting the kind of the right time and location is also really key. So we need to make sure that we choose a location and a time where we can really fully attend to the conversation, where we're not bothered by someone else or distracted by something. Otherwise, it might be hard for the issue to be dealt with openly and honestly and effectively. And it might not hurt to give a little bit of a preview to the conversation that you want to have to prevent blindsiding someone. That way, the other parties can be kind of aware of what you want to discuss, and they can start formulating their own mind and getting it ready to participate in a vital conversation with you. So let's say, for example, here that you've got a quarterly strategic call with one of your vendors. Let's say it's a clinical weight loss vendor. And let's pretend just for a moment here that the vendor isn't really pulling its weight lately. They haven't really brought a lot of great new ideas. Their marketing materials are not super awesome. The participation numbers that you've noticed on your side of things have been kind of waning for a while, but your manager really likes the program or thinks it should stick around because of maybe a lengthy partnership, or because maybe it's because it's free, it has a low budget, or maybe just because that it has good support from leadership. So when is the right time and where's the right time to have this conversation with your manager? Probably not immediately before your next quarterly call, probably in a one-on-one setting, or maybe with partners on your team who support you, or maybe a participant who might support you. Probably not in front of a large group. Probably needs to happen sooner than later, so the disappointment that you have in this vendor doesn't continue to build and manifest in other ways. There's an adage in Vital Conversation that says that if you don't talk it out, you will act it out. So don't let your feelings turn into poor actions, poor behaviors, poor habits. So start talking about problems sooner than later. This next part is helpful. It can help us kind of overcome some of our fears. If we feel like, I just want to put this aside, I can't handle a conversation like this, it's not for me, I'm going to let it go. And that's that everyone typically finds this conversation difficult. If you're introducing a difficult conversation, it's not just you, it's also them who's very likely to find that this is difficult, this is not easy. So we kind of share that together. So embrace the fact that it will be difficult to them. Because of that, we need to enter the discussion with empathy, with compassion, and enter assuming that you have something to learn. So let's say, for example, that one of your well-being committee members, your wellness committee members, maybe has missed the last couple of meetings, that regular meetings that you have, hasn't really contributed to group conversation on email or chat. He's kind of just been isolating himself. Maybe it feels like he's ghosting you. So there's at least a decent chance that he feels just as bad as you do that he hasn't participated or attended recently. So it's time for a quick vital conversation. So you can start by just saying, hey, just wanted to see how you've been doing lately. What's new? And he might go ahead and open up about the reason for his absences. If you just plant a really simple, compassionate, non-provocative, non-defensive question like that, which aims to kind of learn something new and not necessarily call somebody out. So when we engage in a vital conversation, it's important to make sure that we find a lot of mutual purpose. So look for common ground and resist trying to lead others in the party toward what you personally have as a desired outcome. So understand their goals and find alignment and think about how their goals can complement yours. A really good example of this is make sure that you're always aware of your CEO's goals and your leadership goals, your organization's goals. So oftentimes these goals are listed on a website internally, or you can visit your public facing website and kind of read about your organization's mission and purpose and values. So when we ask the CEO and leadership for a new budget each and every year, right? Please support my programs, please support my salary. It's also important that we make sure that we're aware of what the leadership is trying to accomplish as well with the business. So you can align your initiatives that you create with that of kind of the bigger and the communal purpose of the organization. So it's very normal to have these problems. It's very common. Anytime we have a group of people that includes two or more, there's going to be conflict. But it's also important to know that conflict can be very healthy and it can lead to great understanding and great progress. So remember that anytime that you are trying to accomplish something that is important, then it's very likely you'll need to have a vital conversation. And the best way to reduce the number of vital conversations that you have in your life is to try not to accomplish anything that is meaningful that's meaningful for you. So nobody really wants that. I'm going to just shift gears a little bit here and kind of discuss some of the key items of concern for when you are in the conversation. So kind of just covered what you can do to prepare. Now here's some tools and some tactics and some advice for once you're in that conversation and you've dove in and you're ready to go. So first is safety first. So when the stakes are high and when opinions vary and emotions are strong, it is important to make sure that everyone involved in the conversation feels safe. So look for signs of fear. So things like avoidance or withdrawing, or even more aggressive signs of fear can manifest like things like controlling. So bring the conversation back to safety by asking questions and asking for opinions, asking for thoughts and feedback, and by listening to and embracing those opinions and that feedback, looking them in the eye so they understand that they are being heard. It's also important to make sure that you stick with the facts during a vital conversation. So this can be challenging because sometimes it's easy for us to confuse the stories that we kind of tell ourselves, which may not include all of the truth and all of the facts. So as a leader of well-being and a leader of people, we need to keep the focus on the facts in order to make sure that dialogue stays on track. So for example, a lot of times the facts and the research and the literature that scientists and researchers are conducting in their labs and in academia, they don't always help us out as wellness and well-being leaders. They don't tell the full story about the value that we provide as a leader in our organization. We hear it quite a bit. It seems like once or twice a year, there's always kind of a big bombshell type of research project that comes out that that kind of puts a wet blanket on the impact that wellness can have inside an organization. So if someone is pressing you about the quantitative data in your program or in wellness and well-being in general, really be prepared to tell about the qualitative data that you have collected and that as an industry we have collected. So things like observations and stories and open-ended feedback, and even non-scientific polls or surveys that you conduct and that you compile during and after your initiatives. These are qualitative data that you can share, and it's really hard for managers and executives to argue against human stories, especially human stories that come from their organization that's not quantifiable. Um, in this, it's always that's always been true, but in currently, everyone right now, all leaders of organizations are trying to improve their employment brand. And there's a lot of great jobs everywhere else inside your community, inside your state, and inside the country. There's great jobs everywhere. So capture these stories that help leaders understand why your workplace is the best place to be, and that can contribute to the value that you add to your organization that's outside of just improving health risks and health outcomes. When you're in that conversation, it's important to stay curious. So it's common for people when we're in this difficult conversation, this vital conversation, it's common for people to kind of shut down or walk away, or even to react with anger. So that's fight or flight right there. So in order to bring that dialogue back to a safe place, we need to be curious and ask questions and ask about why they might be feeling that way, and to be sincere about the questions that we're asking when we're trying to get to the source of whatever emotion it is, their anger or their denial or whatever they're expressing. For example, so a few years ago, we made the decision at Gallup to reduce the dollar amount of the incentives that we were offering to associates and their family members. So kind of a hard decision. And this was a couple of years pre-COVID. So I was on board with the strategy. Ultimately, leadership kind of drove it, but they needed me to get on board with the strategies, and eventually I did. But a big reason why I was able to jump on board with this strategy is because I was seeing just how kind of unmotivating the rewards were making people. A lot of, not a lot, but just enough people were simply doing kind of the bare minimum of just going with the flow to achieve the highest maximum dollar amount. So I could kind of see how intrinsic value was waning for some of our population. But reducing the budget for incentives was really unpopular for some people. One person in particular came to me and he was really upset and he wanted to have a conversation. But he was kind of too angry to have one. And I could recognize that. It's a two-way here. So vital conversations, if you recognize that you're the recipient of one, it's important. And to be armed with some advice and some tactics, like rather than coming out strong and defending your stance, coming with questions. So I ask questions, I listen to him, looked him in the eye, let him speak, and I kind of just let him recover his emotions because I knew he wasn't bringing his best self to the conversation. So it did take a while. He did get his the words that he wanted to say out, and he did emotionally come down. After he was able to say his piece, I was able to kind of share my side of the story about motivation, about leadership, about budgets, about well-being, about intrinsic motivation, and ultimately he did understand. So by starting with curiosity, I helped him feel heard, helped him kind of overcome those emotions, and that way our conversation could travel back down a path of productivity. We are going to get into a breakout here in just a little bit. I just have a couple more things before we practice a little bit here, but just a couple more here. So words really matter. What we say matters, and the way that we say the way what we say matters as well. So that means we've got to approach our conversations with a lot of purpose and clarity. And a lot of times there is a gap between what we say and what we mean and how someone perceives or interprets what we are saying. So when you're in a vital conversation, make sure that you are really blending confidence with humility and compassion, and really be confident enough to kind of state the opinions and the facts, but also be willing to accept a differing point of view as well. And the last key here for when you're in the conversation, so it's to avoid either or types of choices, which is essential for creating great outcomes for both sides of the party. So you shouldn't have to choose between A or B outcomes or behaviors. So be willing to kind of meet on common ground when you're there. So for example, let's say you're negotiating a new salary, which is absolutely one of the hardest conversations that an employee has with a manager. Might be the most difficult one. But let's say you're also you might just be talking about maybe a new job title or acquiring some new job responsibilities. Maybe you want to kind of get rid of some of your job responsibilities, but you want to take in some new ones as well. So it's important to understand that not only what you hope to get out of this conversation as an outcome, but also it's also important to be realistic that you might not get all the way there in that initial first conversation. So really be open to middle ground and expect the conversation to go to a spot that's probably somewhere in the middle. And if you're still unhappy with the middle, it's good to ask about a timeline or to get an explanation and an expectation for when and how you can get to the place where you want to get to. So, fix this here. So, what we're going to do next is we're going to get into our groups, and we're going to go ahead and describe a conversation that you have had or one that you would like to have. Maybe it's something that you've been storing inside about one of the following topics. So I'll list these out here. So you'll get together with your group. Katie will put you in a group and you can choose one of these three items. You'll get 1 to 2 minutes apiece to talk about them. And feel free to just really open up and share a conversation that you'd like to have or one that you've had in the past about these topics. So could be an interpersonal issue. So something like you're not getting along well with someone on your team or someone within your organization. It could be starting a new program that's not in your lane. If you've ever heard of that one told to you, it doesn't feel good. So in our field though, there's so many new and essential concepts that we can integrate into our kind of our physical health responsibilities, things like diversity and inclusion and mental health and emotional intelligence. So it could be something like that, or could be enhancing your compensation or title or responsibilities. If you're having a tough time with one of those three, feel free to choose your own conversation in your professional life that you're either dreading or avoiding. But if you stepped up and handled it well, it would really improve your life. So Katie, I'll let you go ahead and ship everybody to their virtual rooms.
And that sounds good, Ryan. Is 7 minutes okay for this first one? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and open all rooms. So go ahead and accept the room invite when you see it pop up. Welcome back, everyone.
Hey, thanks. That was awesome. Heard some great things about negotiating pay, talking about responsibilities at work, new initiatives. If you weren't in my breakout room, I joined someone else's. So maybe I'll join you in the next one. We got a couple more opportunities to discuss and to teach, which I appreciate. You know, it's like it's such a really cool tight niche that we have as wellness and well-being leaders. So I think the more that we can share, even like in the deep stuff, just makes us you know, feel better and feel like, okay, somebody's been through this before. I can get ideas from him or her. So I appreciate that. So we talked a little bit about safety, and I want to come back to it for a little bit here. So and let's see here. So I want to talk though about psychological safety, and psychological safety is that's kind of what we're talking about when we mention safety first. It's not, obviously there's certain workplaces where there's a physical component of safety that needs to be addressed, um, but I'm talking a little bit more about psychological safety as it relates to conversations. So psychological safety is really, it's important for honesty and for respectfulness and genuine conversation to occur. And here is how we kind of evaluate psychological safety at Gallup. We use the term employee engagement. And employee engagement really, if you think about engaged employees, it kind of helps you understand how to create more vital conversations within your organization, not just for you, but also for everyone else to have. This can be, vital conversations can be for you. It can also be something that you can teach your organization, or at least teach your team, and it can spread from there. So engaged employees are your most enthusiastic employees. They drive innovation and they drive performance within your team, within your department, within your organization. And they feel psychologically safe because they feel like their opinions matter, and they feel like the mission of the organization matters, and they are learning and growing a lot. They have those opportunities, and they take those opportunities. They seek them out and they find them and they jump on it. They have a strong sense of belonging in the organization, and they have strong friendships at work as well. So they're also the ones who kind of tend to go way above and beyond expectation. And a lot of times they can just kind of do this effortlessly because they're really psychologically committed to the organization. So these are these are kind of the subcomponents of engagement and psychological safety. So you can evaluate safety and engagement with these 12 components. So all the way at the bottom of the pyramid, it's hard to see the pyramid in there, but it starts with basic needs. So the first question is, and this is kind of a rating scale. This is a survey that we conduct, but it also can be a tool for you to utilize and apply to the work that you're doing. So I know what's expected of me at work, and I have the materials and equipment that I need to do my work right. And then above, the next rung in the pyramid, at work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best. So I get to use my strengths, and I get recognized for doing good work. And my supervisor or someone at work cares about me as a human being. And there's someone at work who encourages my development. Next rung is my opinions seem to count, and the mission of the organization makes me feel like my job is important, and my teammates and my coworkers are committed to doing quality work, and I have a best friend at work. And then the highest part of engagement is having a deep conversation with a manager about your progress and having opportunities to learn and to grow in your work. So we're quickly going to kind of get right back into a breakout here and have a chance to discuss this topic this psychological safety and how it relates to vital conversations. So again, you'll have 1 or 2 minutes to discuss, and I just want you to talk about how you would start a vital conversation with your manager, or could be a leader in your organization, if you feel like one of these items felt like it was off track. So try to pick just one. Um, Sometimes there might be 2 or 3 or 4 of these items that just aren't up to par for you, but pick one that you would like to discuss, and think about how you could start a conversation with your manager about that particular item. So Katie, we're ready to break out.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, we're back. Thank you everyone for sharing. Sometimes these really feel personal and they feel difficult, but they're obviously very important to have. Those are validated statements and questions that we can ask to improve psychological safety. So you can always return to those at a later date as well, and just kind of keep them in mind as you're developing, whether it's content, programs, or your own career. So what I want to do next is discuss strengths and how it can kind of contribute to not just well-being, but also better conversations within your organization. So strengths are really your unique combination of talents and skills and knowledge that really influence how you think and how you behave and how you feel. And they're your innate characteristics they're unique to your soul, and they're developed through experience and learning. And when you have really emotionally rich days and rich experiences at work, it's very likely that you were using your strengths to during that day to complete a task, or to collaborate with a team, or to accomplish something significant. And one way to tell if you're using your strengths or not at work is by following those 4 E's that are listed there. So when you can do your work with ease, and when you are excelling in your job, when you're having fun and you enjoy your job, and when you feel like your tank is pretty full and you've got energy to do more, then it's pretty likely that you're using your strengths. If you feel the opposite of any of those 4 E's, then that's all right. That's common. It's likely that there's some strengths that you just haven't tapped into yet and developed a way to utilize them in your current role. And here's how we can kind of quantify the significance of strengths. This study is all about resilience here. So we asked more than 6,000 respondents how well they are able to adapt well when they're facing change. So those who are fully engaged, so they have high engagement, those 12 questions, those who have high well-being, and as well as those who fully utilize their strengths are a lot more likely to say that they always adapt well to change than those who kind of otherwise don't fully utilize their strengths in their work. And this is a survey, a study of 2,000 employees in Japan. We found that 20% of Japan's their working population was experiencing high stress. So in this research, after controlling for demographic differences, things like age and gender and hours worked per week, researchers found that engaged employees who kind of love what they do every day and those who are in a workplace where they can use their natural strengths and talents, and those who are thriving in many of the well-being elements, they're a lot less likely to have high stress. So those who are engaged and who utilize their strengths and have thriving well-being, they have just a 1% chance of being highly stressed. So when those criteria are not met, 43% of workers said that they experienced high stress. So besides taking the Clifton Strengths Finder or the VIA Strengths Finder, which is a free one you can take online, or any other strengths assessment that you'd like to take to kind of tap into this kind of the superhuman powers of you, a great way to communicate with others, like your teammates or your manager, about your strengths is called the Strengths Manifesto. So you get the best of me when, you get the worst of me when, and you can count on me to, and what I need from you is. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into our last group, our last breakout group here, and I'm going to put these questions in the chat. Can I do that, Katie, so everybody has them handy?
Yeah.
Okay. Sweet. So we're ready to go.
Okay, that sounds good. I will open all rooms. I'm going to pop you in a different room, right?
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you answering those questions, and I encourage you to take them with you. And it can be, that's something you could give to your manager, or you could get like as you're starting your next team meeting, or you know, maybe it's not your next team meeting, but a team meeting in the future. You could start with an icebreaker like that. Or if there's somebody new who's starting on your team, it's a good way to just kind of accelerate learning about the strengths of that individual. So so yeah, feel free to utilize the Strengths Manifesto. And Katie, that was my last slide that I had to share. So I'm willing to you know, take questions from you or from anyone else, and take comments, and just be kind. Remember, I said that you need to come in with maybe, you know, some kind questions with clarity. Think it out before you have this vital conversation. But I hope that everyone enjoyed, had some good things to take away and to implement right away. So thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. And I'm just going to open it up for if anyone to jump in with questions for Ryan while we still have a couple minutes, whether you want to come off mute and share, or you want to drop it in chat. I just want to provide the space for you guys to ask.
Yeah, and while we're waiting for someone, I would just one more thing I would recommend is kind of try to find your vital conversation hero, and find someone in your organization or in your life that you know is not afraid, or has had a lot of good success with overcoming fear of bringing up difficult things, difficult issues and problems, and having vital conversations. I encourage you to get closer to those people and get inspiration from them, because a lot of times that's what we need. We need courage, and a lot of times we can get that from others. And I don't want anybody to ask me about how the Nebraska Cornhuskers are going to do against the Wisconsin Badgers this fall, so we can keep the topic off of that.
One of the questions I had, Ryan, just in relation to this building method, as it really is an important one when we talk about having conversations that further the really the expanded scope of well-being, as I think a lot of well-being leaders are, you know, faced with that opportunity to expand the scope of well-being, to talk about the value of well-being, and really try to ask the question, you know, what is our defined success of a well-being, you know, initiative? Why do we do the work that we do? And so when you think about that as being a vital conversation to have, where do you feel like is a good, just like a great way to step into that conversation, whether you have direct access to your leader, whether you have indirect access, or whether you have, whether it's really difficult to access someone to have that conversation? How do you, or what's your advice or I guess idea around stepping into that?
Yeah, it might depend on the context of wellness and well-being and where it's at within your organization. But I think it's important to make sure you ask leaders, and you can kind of plant these questions with your manager if you don't have direct access to, a key person in leadership that you really want to ask this question to. So you can kind of plant it with your manager, but just make it really simple and just ask how things are going and what else should we be focused on. And it's hard to get that face time with executives, but with your manager should be checking in a lot more frequently, and they're obviously, your manager is getting information from leadership, so that question can be answered, at least partially, from directly with your manager. But yeah, just simple questions, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It can just be very simple, like, what else can I focus on? I'm curious about this concept. Maybe it's diversity and inclusion. I would like to include it and embed it. Who could I talk to within the organization? Who's an expert in it? Or who could I bring in to start getting it integrated in what we do? And what are some values that I could align to within the organization? What are some goals that we want to accomplish as a business that I can start kind of integrating into the content, into the communications that I'm putting out all the time.
Awesome.
I wish I was there to join you for your September 21st shindig, your get together. It looks like a fun place.
Yeah, it's going to be really great. It's going to be, we're going to kind of oscillate indoor, outdoor, given the weather's on board, but we're excited about it. And, one of the things that we're really bringing to life at our conference is that the building of the people-centered leadership skills. And I think that also relates to the conversation that we had today about leaning into your strengths when it comes to, applying your conversational skills and being able to really be coach-like and curious and empathetic and leading with empathy. And so a lot of the words that you use today are what we are focusing a lot of the learning content on, to continue to build how to do that, why that's important. And realizing that it really does start with ourselves to see that need before we can go apply to our teams and to our organizations.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. Anyone else have questions or anything any reflections that you'd like to share? Things that are really hitting home with you, and things that you're excited to put on your Post-its or collect in your toolbox? Okay. All right, you guys. Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon for session 3. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing around vital conversations and the importance they have to our industry. It was fantastic, and I'm so excited that you were able to, and you're getting some love in the chat to say thanks. So thank you for being here, everyone. We're excited to hopefully see you at our conference in a couple weeks. Otherwise, our not last, but our second to last session on collaboration will be in October, where we will talk about, again, bringing this to life on how we continue to build on these different methods to add to our toolbox, and how we can be collaborative leaders as we unite stakeholders in order to further well-being at our organization. So exciting things ahead. We hope you guys have a great rest of the afternoon. And again, thank you, Ryan, so much for being here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.